What is tragedy? The dictionary definition of a tragedy is a drama or literary work in which the main character is brought to ruin or suffers extreme sorrow, especially as a consequence of tragic flaw, moral weakness, or inability to cope with unfavourable circumstances. Tragedy is a genre originating from ancient Athens in Greece around 2,500 years ago. It's made to be acted out in front of an audience and entertains them mainly through human suffering. The element of the plot is a destructive or painful act. However, there have been many interpretations of this genre.
The word tragedy means goat song because in the past people used to take part in singing and dancing performances or competitions. The winner would be rewarded with a goat, which would possibly be sacrificed. Aristotle was a Greek philosopher and wrote a series called Poetics. His elements of Greek tragedy included plot, characters, verbal expression, thought, visual adornment, song competition. In the performances, all characters were played by males. The actors also wore masks. A traditional Greek tragedy consists of the following parts: a prologue, describing the situation and setting of the scene; a parados, an ode sung by the chorus as the protagonists made their entrance; and fine dramatic scenes, each followed by a comus, an exchange of laments by the chorus and the protagonist.
This type of tragedy was created by the Roman philosopher and poet Seneca. He wrote 8 out of 10 first-century dramas. His dramas were mainly inspired by unfortunate occurrences involving bloodthirsty revenge plots which were influenced by rape, lust, and savagery. Not many of his plays were performed on stage. They were closet dramas, written to be read aloud. Senecan tragedies can sometimes include supernatural elements or creatures such as ghosts and witches, particularly relating to the genre of horror.
Influenced by Greek origins, tragedy from the Elizabethan era always involved a protagonist of high rank, power, or fortune. They usually suffer a catastrophe, a sudden reversal of fortune, or a downfall. Themes from these tragedies would include poor leadership decisions, addiction to power, prophetic warnings, or preservation of honour. One of the most famous playwrights from this era is William Shakespeare. This quote from Antony and Cleopatra represents Elizabethan tragedy. The character Enobarbus feels guilty for betraying his best friend. Therefore, he wants to be alone to die because he feels he is not worthy of Antony's affection.
Pierre Corneille, the most successful writer of French tragedies, redefined both comedy and tragedy. He said it deals with the affairs of the estate, for example, wars, dynastic marriages. He also said tragedies do not always have to have a tragic ending. These plays had certain rules to stick to. Unity of action, no more than one plot with very few noble characters. Unity of place, action took place in one location. Unity of time, action of the entire play within 24-hour time period. Decorum, characters had to act in a way that was appropriately based on their social status, wealth, race, and in a way morally acceptable. Verisimilitude, action had to be representative of everyday life.
As opposed to more traditional views on tragedy, the more modern view is that the protagonist and other main characters do not have to be of a high status, meaning suffering can happen to anyone. The idea is that these tragedies are ordinary people in a tragic situation. An example of a modern tragedy is Death of a Salesman by Arthur Miller. The protagonist, Willy Loman, who has been suffering from mental degeneration for many years, has had ongoing tension with his son, Biff, because they had fallen out while Biff was young. At the end of the play, Willy decides to kill himself in order to enable his son to be able to start a business, even though he had gone against his father's will in the past and deliberately failed his school years out of spite.
The Oxford English Dictionary says that a hero is a person who is admired for their courage or outstanding achievements. Aristotle believed that a tragic hero had to have a sudden reversal or change in fortune, partly as a result of error. They had to be morally good, noble, with a high status and dignity. We believe that a hero should be a role model that is inherently good, yet experiences bad events, eventually managing to overcome it. We think they should have courage, be brave, selfless, modest, yet have complexities about them.
The dictionary definition says a central character who lacks the conventional heroic attributes. The modernist view of an anti-hero is that they generally lack traditional heroic glamour. They have moral and psychological complexities, are ambitious, and pursue noble motives whilst breaking the rules.
Verisimilitude means representing the truth of reality. Catharsis is emotional cleansing, often represented by an extreme change in emotion. Hubris means a person experiencing pride, which results in a loss of contact with reality and overestimation of one's abilities. It will often lead to a violation of some form of moral order. Universality means something that represents all life and applies to all situations. Fate is a force of predestination which guides all events which take place. Peripatia is a turning point or sudden reversal of circumstance. Hamartia is a character's fatal flaw. Anagnosis is a moment in a play where a character makes a critical discovery. And a catastrophe is a final defying moment or critical event in which the story of the play is unravelled.
Tragedy has many controversial opinions depending on whose point of view and emotional state you are coming from. For example, in Romeo and Juliet by William Shakespeare, Juliet's cathartic speech just before her death may provoke different emotions in the audience. At this point, she has discovered that her lover Romeo has poisoned himself because he believed that she was dead. Therefore, she is distraught and decides to take her life. Some would say that this is a complete tragedy due to the fact that 2 lives were lost. Their fatal flaws or controllable love wasn't accepted, and this caused friction between the families, and in turn resulted in their death. However, others would argue that this is a selfish act because their circumstance could have been avoided. Looking at this on a small scale, it may be seen as a completely tragic event because it has impacted both the families involved, resulting in family grieving. However, on a global scale, some may think that this is not as tragic as it may seem when comparing it to others, poverty and other global catastrophes.
Tragedy aims to entertain an audience through other people's misfortunes. It is something they can relate to, as they can compare suffering they've had with those of the protagonist. Therefore, this makes the audience member relive the emotions they had during their experience, and this makes them build a relationship with the character. Because of this, it would make them eager to watch the rest of the play to find out the character's fate. Tragedy also allows the audience to not only feel empathy towards the unfortunate character, but to feel a sense of relief that their life is not as unlucky, learning to appreciate what they have, or it could simply be down to curiosity. The events that are associated with tragedy are usually very dramatic, exploring a vast range of extreme emotion, and this may be something exciting and new to somebody watching a tragedy.